Hello there, lovely people. It's Alex from Nintendo Life here, and today we're going to be talking all about Fortnite. Yes, the most contentious of games, and more specifically, its motion controls on the Nintendo Switch. Yes, in case you missed it, in version 5, or season 5 as they're calling it, they introduced motion controls on the Switch version because, I don't know, lots of people were asking for it, and they were like, you got it! And originally this was going to be a video talking about how you can make the Fortnite motion controls as close to Splatoon 2 as possible, or at least Splatoon 2's motion controls. Unfortunately though, as you can probably tell from the title, that is not what this video is about. And it's really annoying because I even managed to fill some of this piece of A4 with numbers until I tried to put it into practice and I realized that it just doesn't work that way. Because unfortunately, Fortnite's motion controls are a bit of a hot mess. Now, of course, if you've been using the motion controls and they really click for you, then don't, sort of take what I say personally. I'm just, expressing my opinion, and I've spoken to some other people as well to make sure that I'm not talking out of my arse. And yeah, this is what I've come up with. Am I out of focus? So yeah, if they work for you, more power to you. Keep cracking on, and don't listen to a word I've got to say. Or do. It's up to you. So anyway, all of this happened last week, this update, when I happened to be on holiday doing this. But even so, I saw the news and I thought, well, I've got to give it a go, at least try it. And so I connected to the hotel's admittedly dodgy Wi-Fi and gave it a go. And there was a lot of latency, but I thought, you know what, this is pretty good. And I was doing it handheld, which I'm not used to doing because I didn't have a dock with me. And I thought, you know what, this is all right. But, the latency was really, really awful. So I thought, I'll give it a proper go when we get back. And I got back, did all this research stuff, and then actually tried using them, which was probably the wrong way to do it. But yeah, I booted it up and actually just tried to play with the motion controls, and I'd worked out what the sensitivity should be for how I play Splatoon 2, which I play it on 3, and it worked out to, I think, 93. Ignore the 81. And I just thought, okay, I'll just dive in and play it, and it was painful. And I thought, okay, well, maybe the sensitivity is too high or too low. And so I spent a good couple of hours just fiddling with the motion control settings to try and get them to a point where they would work for me. And I never got there. It was a little bit annoying, to say the least, because I had this idea for a video and I wanted to get it out that day, and then obviously it didn't work because everything was turned on its head, and I didn't want to dive into this video talking about how I think they are not very good without getting some proper research. So I got in touch with people on Twitter. I asked for people to, I said, I asked for people who play Splatoon 2 to get in touch if they've played Fortnite with the motion controls so that I can have a chat to them, because I think, sort of in terms of community, the people who use motion controls the most, it's gonna be Splatoon 2! At least motion controls in shooty games, shooters. The response was frankly phenomenal. Thank you so much to everyone who got in touch. I got so many messages through, so much information, so many different people giving me their opinions, so thank you so much to all of you, because you are all bloody lovely. Unfortunately, I couldn't eventually respond to everyone because people were sending messages in the night and things like that, and I had to get on and do this video. So to everyone who got in touch, thank you so much. Even if I didn't respond to you, it was really, really touching that you did, and all the information was absolutely spectacular. The overall response, I would say, was generally a little bit mixed, but I would say a good 80% of the people I talked to pretty much shared my opinions. I tried not to give too much away. I tried to keep it vague, although I did say that I was having difficulty, and so there was arguably a little bit of a observer bias there already, but even so, I wanted people to give me honest answers, and some people did say that they actually preferred Fortnite to Splatoon due to, sort of things like greater control over, differences in sensitivity. All I could think of in my head was accuracy for that second there. That doesn't make any sense. But the vast majority of people basically said, yep, they tried it, and they couldn't get along with it, and so they turned it off. And so they just went back to twin stick, even though the people that I was talking to were Splatoon 2 players, and they were all motion control users, except a few who said they don't use motion controls, and so they weren't much help. But still very much appreciated. And after reading all your messages and conversing with you all, I think I may have got down to the nub of what makes the motion controls in Fortnite so different to those in Splatoon 2, and even, sort of other games that have motion controls, even things like Breath of the Wild and stuff like that, which we'll come on to in just a moment. People have largely described the motion controls as jittery and some people have even said that it's low resolution, which is a weird expression, but it does kind of make sense. Basically, what people are saying, and I wholeheartedly agree with this, is that it feels like you're moving on a grid. Rather in Splatoon, where every motion is smooth and lovely, in Fortnite, it's more like you're going click, click, click. Although obviously, you know, nowhere near that exaggerated, I'm just doing it for the sake of video. Another major problem is that there seems to be quite a large dead zone, so that, you know, sort of any movements, any sort of very slight, subtle movements like that don't get registered at all, and that appears to be an intentional thing because you don't want sort of subtle little shaky movements reacting on screen. But then you kind of do, because that's how it is in Splatoon 2, and that, well, I think that is the gold standard when it comes to motion controls in shooters. When it comes to playing Splatoon, I want to move relatively small movements. I do want to be able to do, you know, sort of precise movements and not have to worry about being absolutely teeny tiny, but at the same time, I want to be able to do smaller movements. I don't want to be moving my hands around like this. I want to be able to do smaller movements like this. Maximum. That means that on the whole, most of my movements are more like this, which is very small, and Fortnite doesn't always pick those up because of this dead zone. You have to be moving fairly quickly, use fairly fast motions rather than small, smooth, precise motions in order for it to even register, which is a big problem, obviously. As such, it's not picking up some of the movement, and so when you go back to your neutral position, if you go back there slowly, your neutral position won't be a neutral position because it'll already have changed and you'll have to use the sticks to readjust, which is just not brilliant. The final thing is a much more sort of personal view for me, and that's the fact that there is no button to reset back to the center like there is in Splatoon 2. Generally in Splatoon 2, it's the Y button. In fact, I think it always is. Now, the Y button's reload in Fortnite, so that's fine, but you know, sort of even clicking the stick in or something like that, the fact is that there isn't an option to do that, and I understand a lot of people will prefer it how it currently is, but you know, just to give the option, because I think there's a big reason they've done that in Splatoon, is so that you can very quickly reset to your neutral position, and if there's some slight adjustment in the motion controls and they haven't picked up everything superbly, you can just press Y and immediately, boom, you're back in the center in your neutral, comfortable position. And I think that's really important and something lacking in Fortnite. But again, that especially is a very sort of personal thing and not something that is absolutely required for motion controls to work, because you don't have it in Breath of the Wild. I don't think. I'd also really like to be able to disable Y-axis movement on the right stick, but again, that's a Splatoon trope, and you know, I'm sure lots of people prefer to be able to use the Y stick up and down still, but I don't. But again, that's extremely personal. All of these little issues seem to be really highlighted when you use the scope mode. Now, Fortnite does allow you to change the sensitivity when you're aiming down sights or using a scope, which is pretty good, but I don't want to do that. I want it to be one-to-one no matter what I'm doing, so there's a sense of consistency. And, you know, if you want to have that option so that when you're aiming down sights, you can do bigger movements for smaller movements on screen, then, you know, that's fine. You know, that option is there. But when I set all the sensitivities to the same, it doesn't work because it really just exacerbates all the issues. I wasn't actually capturing at the time, but when I was playing to try and, you know, just make sure that the motion controls were good on the settings that I wanted before my eyes were opened, I managed to get this using the in-game capture, which is why it looks a bit janky. For some reason, it wants to really stick to those X and Y axes as straight as possible, rather than going diagonally like that. It seems to really want to stay as close as possible to that X axis especially. And I don't know whether that was the way I was playing, but certainly in Splatoon 2, I can't be that accurate, and unfortunately, being that accurate is a disadvantage. Because if I want to be going up slightly at diagonal, it's trying to sort of stick to that X-axis, and I've just realized before anyone says, yes, I have turned off aim assist, because a lot of people say that fixes it, and it doesn't. Another thing that people recommended is that they've deactivated motion controls when they're running around and only activated them when they're aiming down sights, a bit like Breath of the Wild. I said we'd come back to it, didn't I? I think this is better overall, but it doesn't escape the problems of having, you know, the limited movement and the big dead zone and stuff like that. It doesn't fix the problem. I think it is better than having it on all the time. So yes, thank you for that. It was genuinely an eye-opening experience to use it that way, but it doesn't fix the issue. The good news is, however, is that these are all perfectly fixable problems. There's nothing inherently wrong with the way that they've been implemented. It's just they need more refinement. And who knows, you know, the devs may well have already refined them far further. It's just that they haven't released that version of the game yet. And, you know, in the next update, they're going to be smooth as butter. We don't know. And I think that that's something they should definitely aim for, if indeed they're not already doing it, which I'm guessing they already are. They are so nearly there, but there are these few little issues popping up here and there that can be very easily fixed that unfortunately right now means that the motion controls aren't really viable. But as I've said time and time again, this can be very easily fixed, and I really hope the devs do it. And if they do and they manage to get it as close to Splatoon 2 as possible, or even just, you know, sort of better than it currently is, so that they are at least viable, it's going to be marvelous. But right now, it's not really worth turning them on, which is a shame, unless you're having fun with it and you're enjoying it and you're doing well with it, in which case, crack on. Again, I want to say a massive thanks to every person who got in touch with me. You have been absolutely marvelous, and this video wouldn't have been nearly as good if it weren't for your input, so thank you so much. But what do you think? Let us know what you think about the Fortnite motion controls down there in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, then why don't you try and aim and miss that subscribe button with a sniper rifle, or just click it, that would work as well. And be sure to check out NintendoLife.com for all sorts of lovely Nintendo-related content. Thank you again for watching. Bye-bye.